In 1956, the United States began building 48,000 miles of highway. Concrete poured across farmland. Asphalt stretched through desert. Steel bridges thrown over rivers that had divided states for centuries. They called it progress, the interstate highway system, a promise of movement, of speed, of connection. From coast to coast, we stitched the country together with road. What we didn't build was a way to see what moved between the stitches. At night, the interstate feels endless. Truck stops glowing like islands, rest areas half lit and humming, exit signs flashing green against empty sky. There are long stretches where you can drive for miles without seeing another car. No witnesses, no neighbors, no one asking questions, just blacktop and whatever passes over it before databases linked departments, before missing persons reports crossed state lines, before the FBI built systems to connect patterns. A body found in Kentucky didn't belong to Indiana. A missing girl in Tennessee didn't echo in Arkansas. Jurisdictions stopped at the border, but the road didn't. And somewhere in the quiet between mile markers, someone understood something simple. If you keep moving, you don't leave a pattern. You leave fragments. Truck drivers logged thousands of miles a week. Transients drifted from exit to exit. Sex workers worked the spaces where headlights slowed. The interstate didn't ask who you were, it only asked where you were going, and that made it perfect, because some killers didn't hide. They traveled, and the road helped them. Someone figured out how to use them to kill. This is Interstate, highly deadly, and you're listening to Deadly Truths with Becca. The truck was already idling when she stepped up to the passenger door. Diesel engines don't hum, they vibrate. Low, constant, mechanical. The kind of sound that settles into your ribs if you stand too close. It was late, the kind of late where truck stop lights feel harsher than daylight. Sodium vapor, glare bouncing off chrome, coffee burnt down to sludge on hot plates inside. He looked ordinary. Baseball cap, neutral expression, calm voice. He didn't rush her, didn't leer, didn't touch, just opened the door from inside and waited. The cab smelled like fuel and vinyl and stale air. No one inside the diner watched her climb in. No one followed the truck when it eased back onto the highway. Interstate 55 swallowed them whole. The road at night is a corridor without edges. Fields flatten into blackness. Billboards become silhouettes. The only landmarks are mile markers counting down like quiet metronomes. Inside the cab, he drove steady, controlled, predictable. That's important. Predators who operate on highways cannot afford chaos. They need structure, schedules, plausible routes. He had those. He was a long-haul driver. He had paperwork. He had delivery logs. He had a reason to cross state lines. Somewhere south of the last lit exit, he took a detour, not dramatic, just a gradual drift off the main artery, gravel instead of pavement, dark instead of reflective paint. No traffic cameras, no way stations, no witnesses. When the truck stopped, the engine didn't turn off immediately. It kept running. That part matters, because when engines run, screams don't travel far. Inside the sleeper compartment behind the cab was something most long-haul drivers do not carry: restraints. A makeshift system bolted into the frame. This wasn't improvisation. This was design. What happened next would not be visible from the road, and that was the point. When you commit violence in one state and dispose of evidence in another, you fracture the narrative. A missing person report begins in one jurisdiction. A body is found in another. Before national databases, before shared digital systems, before behavioral pattern tracking, fragmentation was protection. By the time she was found, she wasn't near the truck stop. She wasn't near the highway. She was off-road, discarded. The cause of death, strangulation. The suspect, unknown. The connection to other victims, invisible, at least at first. Robert Ben Rhoades did not look like a monster. That sentence appears in almost every case file involving him. Average height, controlled demeanor, no theatrical cruelty in public. But he carried something more dangerous than rage. He carried patience. Long-haul trucking in the 1980s meant autonomy, weeks on the road, cash payments, minimal oversight, paper logs that could be adjusted. You could cross Illinois, Missouri, Texas, Arkansas in days. You could vanish into the highway system, and if you selected victims who were already moving, hitchhikers, sex workers, women between destinations, their disappearances did not trigger immediate statewide alerts. In 1990, everything cracked. An Arizona state trooper saw Rhoades' truck near a rest area along Interstate 10. No chase, no shootout, just routine suspicion. Inside the cab, a woman was found alive, bound, beaten, restrained within the sleeper compartment. This time, the road did not protect him. The design of his crimes became visible only after mobility was interrupted. That is the pattern with interstate killers, highway serial killers. Hundreds of murders along interstate corridors were analyzed for mobility patterns. Truck stops, rest areas, service plazas. Infrastructure becomes ecosystem, and ecosystems can be exploited. Rhoades wasn't hunting in neighborhoods. He wasn't stalking coworkers. He wasn't rooted in a community. He was transient by profession, and that transient identity shielded him. The interstate system created anonymity at scale. You can drive 8 hours and never repeat a face. You can cross 3 jurisdictions before dawn. And until agencies communicate, those cases don't speak to each other. They sit in separate filing cabinets, different counties, different states, different detectives. No pattern, just isolated tragedy. That illusion protected him longer than brutality did. Because we were still thinking locally, still investigating in circles, while he drove in lines. Interstate killers don't need elaborate cover stories. They need mileage. They need distance. They need the space between jurisdictions. And in the late 20th century, America gave them exactly that. The highway promised freedom. What it delivered was invisibility. Robert Ben Rhoades was born on November 22, 1945 in Council Bluffs, Iowa, a small city sitting right across the Missouri River from Omaha, Nebraska. Most of his childhood was spent in the Omaha area, where he grew up after his parents' marriage fell apart. His early home life was unstable. After the divorce, Rhoades was raised largely by his grandparents. Family accounts describe a tense household and a distant relationship with his father. By the time he reached his teenage years, people around him saw him as withdrawn, angry, and socially isolated. In other words, the kind of kid teachers quietly hoped would move to another school district. Trouble escalated during adolescence. As a teenager, Rhoades was arrested after threatening a girl with a knife and attempting to assault her. The case did not result in a long sentence, but it revealed a pattern of aggression and control that investigators would later recognize as an early warning sign. If the phrase "red flag" had been as popular in the 1960s as it is now, this would have been the kind of moment where everyone should have been waving one. In the mid-1960s, Rhoades enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Military service did not straighten him out the way it sometimes did for troubled young men. Instead, his time in the Marines was marked by disciplinary problems. At one point, he assaulted a superior officer and was sentenced to time in military confinement. Needless to say, that's not exactly how you climb the promotion ladder. After leaving the Marines, Rhoades drifted through a series of low-skill jobs and manual labor. Eventually, he became a long-haul truck driver. The job put him on highways across the United States for weeks at a time. For most drivers, it was just a paycheck and a lot of bad coffee at truck stops. For Rhoades, it provided the anonymity and mobility that would later allow him to move quietly from state to state without drawing attention. Because Rhoades wasn't the anomaly, he was the proof of concept. The first body wasn't found near where she disappeared. That's how it usually starts. She vanished near a truck stop. The report was filed in one state. Her body surfaced somewhere else, rural, unlit, off a secondary road branching from an interstate. Different county, different detectives. Her name entered one database. Her body entered another, and neither spoke to the other. In March of 1990, Candace Walsh and Douglas Zisowski were doing something that, at the time, still felt normal for a lot of young travelers, hitchhiking across the western United States. They were in their early 20s, moving from ride to ride along long stretches of interstate highway. The plan was simple: get west, see a little of the country, and figure things out as they went. It was the kind of loose, open-ended road trip that felt very 80s. No smartphones, no location sharing. Just backpacks, the open road, and the assumption that most people were decent. At some point along a highway in Texas, a semi-truck pulled over and the driver offered them a ride. The driver was Robert Ben Rhoades, a long-haul trucker who had spent years moving quietly across American highways. To Candace and Doug, he probably looked like exactly what he was supposed to look like. Another truck driver headed the same direction. If you were hitchhiking in the late 80s, a truck was actually one of the more common rides you could get. Lots of people did it. Most of them made it where they were going. This ride was different. Investigators later determined that once the couple was inside the truck, Rhoades took control quickly. His truck had already been modified with restraints and chains in the sleeper compartment behind the seats. At some point after picking them up, he separated the two of them. Douglas was killed first. Authorities believe Rhoades murdered him soon after the abduction so he could control Candace without interference. Candace Walsh was kept alive. For a period of time, possibly hours or longer, she was held captive inside the sleeper cab while Rhoades continued driving along interstate routes. His truck functioned like a mobile prison, moving quietly down the highway, passing through state lines where nobody knew what was happening just a few feet behind the driver's seat. Thousands of vehicles probably passed that truck while she was inside it. None of them knew. Eventually, Rhoades drove into Utah, where Candace was murdered. Her body was later discovered in a remote area in Millard County, Utah. For a moment, the case looked like it might become one more highway mystery. 2 travelers gone missing, their bodies discovered hundreds of miles apart, no obvious suspect. In the pre-internet era, crimes like that could sit unsolved for years. Candace and Douglas weren't just a disappearance on the highway anymore. It was the first glimpse into the hunting ground of what investigators would later call the truck stop killer, which, if you think about it, is the nightmare version of every just hop-in road trip decision kids made in the 80s. Most rides ended with a thank you and a wave. This one ended very differently. No one was checking delivery routes. No one was mapping truck corridors. The interstate was background noise. By the time her body was recovered, she was no longer attached to the place she vanished. Then there was Regina Walters, 14 years old, traveling. Her body was found in Illinois in a barn. More chilling, if that is possible. Ricky Lee Jones, Regina's boyfriend, was abducted with her and later shot her. Investigators were able to link this all together after the fact, of course. Hundreds of miles apart, in the photograph taken before her death, later discovered in the killer's possession. Her long hair had been cut short. She was wearing a black dress and heels. She appeared visibly terrified. The haircut is widely documented. It appears to have been done by Rhoades after the abduction. The black dress and heels were also documented in the photographs recovered from his truck. But before that photograph was found, before the arrest, she was just another missing teenager, another body in Illinois. No red string connecting the two. Each case handled locally, each autopsy filed locally, each detective working their own radius. The road system was national, law enforcement wasn't. In the 1980s, information moved slower than trucks. Paper reports, phone calls, faxes. and sometimes nothing at all. If a victim had no stable address, no consistent employment, no clear last known location, the urgency softened. Transient victims are harder to anchor. Sex workers, hitchhikers, women drifting between cities. Their absence didn't always trigger statewide alarms. The killer moved, the victims moved, and the road erased the seams. When Rhoades crossed from Illinois into Texas, he didn't cross into a unified policing system. He entered a new jurisdiction. He didn't need to outsmart forensic science. He needed to outpace communication. And for years, he did. Some counties began to notice similarities. Strangulation, dump sites within miles of highway exits, victims last seen near truck stops. But noticing similarity is not the same as proving connection. Without shared databases, patterns live in memory. And memory is fragile, especially when detectives rotate assignments, especially when budgets are thin. It wasn't that law enforcement didn't care. It was that they were looking through keyholes. Each office saw one room. No one saw the hallway. And the hallway was the interstate. When the Arizona troopers found a woman alive in his truck, it didn't just interrupt a crime. It forced the rooms to open. Evidence recovered inside that cab didn't belong to one state. It belonged to many. Photographs tied Texas to Illinois. Restraints connected to missing persons. Suddenly, what looked isolated became linear. What felt local became national. That's the recurring truth with interstate killers. They are rarely caught through pattern recognition. They are caught through interruption, a traffic stop, a mechanical issue, a mistake. When investigators began reviewing older cases after Rhoades' arrest, they saw something chilling. Bodies found near interstates, victims last seen near truck stops, women with unstable housing situations. For years, those cases had sat alone. Now they formed a corridor. And if one corridor existed, there were likely others. The interstate system had done exactly what it was designed to do: move people quickly, cross borders efficiently, reduce friction. But that same efficiency reduced investigative friction for offenders. The highway doesn't ask for identification, it doesn't log passengers, it doesn't remember faces, it just carries weight. And sometimes that weight was human. By the early 90s, investigators began asking a question that should have been obvious decades earlier. How many unsolved murders were connected not by geography, but by asphalt? How many predators understood that distance is protection? The answer wasn't comforting. And it didn't begin with Rhoades. It began with a realization. The system wasn't built to track movement, and the killers were built for nothing else. Next, and when the FBI finally started connecting dots, they discovered something far worse than one truck stop predator. They discovered a network of highways and a pattern that had been there all along. For decades, killings occurred along America's highways with no alarm bell attached. But something had to break, not with a bang, but with a map. In 2004, the Federal Bureau of Investigation took a step that was long overdue. It created the Highway Serial Killings Initiative under the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, known as VICAP. VICAP itself began decades earlier as a database where local and federal law enforcement could submit detailed homicide data so analysts could identify similar patterns across jurisdictions, something that rarely happened when departments worked in isolation. But the Highway Serial Killings Initiative specifically focused on murders and disappearances tied to the nation's roadways. Analysts began to identify an unmistakable but hidden fact. Women were being found dead alongside interstates at levels far higher than anyone had cataloged before. Not in one county, not in one state, along highways that connected them all. But let's not get ahead of ourselves with this story. Let's get back to Rhoades and his cab and the crime scene. When the Arizona trooper opened the passenger door, the pattern was still invisible. Inside the sleeper compartment of the semi-truck, they found a woman alive, bound, chained to a metal ring bolted into the cab. That detail changes everything. because restraints installed into the frame of a long-haul truck are not spontaneous. They are structural, deliberate, permanent. Once Rhoades was arrested, the truck became more important than the man. Investigators searched every inch. Photographs were found, Polaroids, women bound in rural structures, women terrified, women who were later identified as missing persons from other states. One image showed Regina Walters standing in a barn as if she knew the photograph was the last moment before something irreversible. That photograph tied states that had never compared notes, and that thread was bolted into a truck. Then came the logbooks. Long-haul drivers document mileage, routes, delivery schedules, paperwork designed for commerce, now re-examined for violence. Investigators began aligning disappearance dates with delivery routes. If a woman vanished near a truck stop in Missouri on a Tuesday and Rhoades' log placed him within 50 miles that night, that was no longer coincidence. When a body was found near an Illinois exit 2 days later and his paperwork showed passage through that corridor, coincidence eroded. This is where fragmentation began to collapse. Because for years, no one had overlaid the paperwork. No one had laid the delivery routes across missing persons reports. The system wasn't built to do that. It took an arrest and a live victim to force it. Now investigators were drawing straight lines across state maps. The interstate was no longer background. It was the through line. And what emerged wasn't chaos. It was repetition. Truck stop pickup, night drive, off-highway isolation, strangulation, dump site near access roads. Return to schedule, continue driving. The predictability is what chills. This wasn't frenzy, it was routine. When prosecutors secured convictions against Rhoades, they could only formally tie him to a limited number of murders. But investigators believed the number was higher. The problem with mobile killers isn't just identification, it's linkage. If a victim's remains are never found, or found years later without forensic clarity, the burden of proof fractures again. And some of the women photographed inside that truck were never conclusively matched to case files. There are faces without names, images without closure, and highways still running through the same towns. What Rhoades exposed wasn't just his own brutality. He exposed a vulnerability, a proof of concept. If one long-haul driver could operate across multiple states, install restraints inside a commercial vehicle, and use delivery routes as camouflage, how many others understood the same math? Law enforcement didn't ask that question loudly at first. They treated him as singular, aberrant, monstrous. But the infrastructure that shielded him remained intact. Interstates still crossed borders without friction. Truck stops still operated at all hours. And paperwork still stopped at jurisdictional lines. The eerie part isn't that he killed, it's that he blended. Thousands of trucks move across America every night, tens of thousands of drivers. The overwhelming majority are ordinary, working, exhausted, and neutral systems don't discriminate between commerce and cruelty. The same road that carries produce from California to Tennessee can carry something else entirely. And it doesn't record what happens between exits. Rhoades was caught because he stopped, not because he was profiled, not because patterns were preemptively identified. A stop interrupted motion, and motion was the shield. If that trooper had not looked twice, if that woman had not been found alive, if that rest stop had not been quiet enough to notice something wrong, the fragments might never have aligned, and Regina Walters would remain a photograph without context, and the interstate would continue humming unexamined. This is the turning point, because now the question shifts, not who was Rhoades, but if the system only saw the pattern after stopping him, what else was still moving? When Rhoades was convicted, many treated him as an anomaly, a monster in a cab, a singular predator who happened to exploit geography. But if he were an outlier, the map would have quieted after his arrest. It didn't. Bodies kept appearing near interstate exits. Women kept disappearing. Remains were still being found off rural access roads connected to the same corridors. The road did not close, and investigators began to understand something uncomfortable. Earlier in this episode, we touched briefly on a system most people have never heard of, VICAP. VICAP was designed to centralize violent crime data. It was voluntary. Departments had to choose to submit their cases, and in the early years, many didn't. Not because they were negligent, because they were overwhelmed, underfunded, focused on immediate fires, and because until someone proves a crime is connected to something bigger, it looks local, always local. After Rhoades' arrest, analysts began revisiting older cases with new questions. Not, who killed this woman? But, where was she last seen? Near what highway? How far from the nearest interstate ramp? What truck routes passed through within 24 hours? Mileage became data. Exit numbers became coordinates. And something unsettling started to form. Clusters. Not in one city, not in one county, but along corridors. I-40, I-65, I-70, I-10. It was vulnerability mapped onto infrastructure. And when investigators compared timelines, routes, and delivery logs of certain suspects, a pattern emerged that went far beyond Rhoades. The psychological connection between those events required coordination that didn't historically exist. Rhoades had simply exposed the blind spot. When the Highway Serial Killings Initiative became public knowledge, the numbers were disturbing. Hundreds of victims found near highways, dozens of suspects, many cases still open, and an acknowledgement that some offenders may have operated for years without ever being identified because their crimes were geographically scattered. If Rhoades had never been stopped in Arizona, how long would he have continued? How many photographs would have been taken inside that cab? How many women would remain disconnected files? That's the question that lingers. Not how monstrous he was, but how invisible he was. Rhoades wasn't an outlier. He was the first time the system was forced to confront the corridor. And once you see the corridor, you can't unsee it. Robert Ben Rhoades received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is alive, imprisoned, and largely silent, and that's its own kind of ending. Follow, rate, share. The road is long, and we're just getting started. Remember, the past isn't dead. It's walking the shoulder after dark.